Do you wish things were better? Do you look around you and you just say, man, this is just not nice. This is not ideal. Well, look, today we're going to talk about could we ever achieve like an ideal world? This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Danny, my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
Yeah, so ideals are interesting concepts, right? Because, like,
Ideally.
I mean, ideally, right? Well, we use that word a lot, but like, I mean, what does it mean to you? I guess I should say, if we start with ideal, like
Uh,
just the concept of an ideal.
you know what comes to mind is like I think it was Plato who talked about like the shapes and everything like that, like the perfect circle,
The
how it's an
theory of the
ideal.
forms.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, yeah,
But they don't actually exist. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I always interpret it as like perfect ideas, although it gives you this idea of like a realm of perfection, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, right? So like everything in the world for Plato, right, is a reflection of those or takes part in. So nothing that we experience in reality could be ideal, right? Those ideals are just ideas. They're like things that exist in another plane. I've always thought of them that way too. I think ideals are ideas to aspire to, but not to necessarily ever be realized because they're perfection, right? I mean, that's what it is. And I think like you look at morality and stuff. Like I think when they talk about the good life and stuff, I often treat that as an ideal, right? It's something that's why Marcus Aurelius, never really was like, okay, I'm enlightened,
It's
and
the
I just ended his
by
book.
my
The end.
course.
Marcus Aurelius kicks ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, bro, I'm enlightened. Check out
By
this
my
course I
course.
made. Yeah. But yeah, he never says that, right? He's continuously working. Like Aristotle doesn't write in the Common Ethics and say, just follow this, you'll be good, right? Like, because it's something you're continuously working on, and there's so many unknowns and variables in the world, right? So I
I
think
think I think
it's
like
really
the only
interesting.
time that people become ideals is like when they die. Like Jesus, when he was crucified, all of a sudden became an ideal. Socrates, when he was martyred, all of a sudden became an ideal. But like other
Yeah.
than that, mm-mm.
Yeah, historically, like people because they become an idea of themselves, right? Like it's funny, we always talk about like you look back at like our founding fathers, like Franklin, Washington, and all, and like the way they're presented when you're young in school, it's like these great individuals, never do anything
I'm sure
wrong.
I'm
They're
sure
like
they're not
these,
presented that way anymore.
well, I
They're
doubt it.
probably
Yeah,
like
yeah, but
these racist men, racist white men.
probably are. But
Okay, yeah.
when we went to school, they were presented that way, and like but the reality is like, look at anybody's life. I don't care how. Even Mother Teresa, I'm sure you can find some stuff, right?
Hmm.
Like the
Yeah,
world's
people are
messy.
human.
Yeah. And I think that's it. Like I always like that. What was it? The utilitarians, like John Stuart Mill, he talks about, higher pleasures. And one thing I always liked was he has that really famous quote where he says, it's better to be Socrates dissatisfied than the fool satisfied. Better to be the human dissatisfied than the pig satisfied.
See, I
And if
never
the
liked that
other,
quote.
yeah. Oh, you never did?
No, because
You're
I was
like,
like, I hate being dissatisfied. I would rather be a
well,
pig
okay.
satisfied.
I think a lot of people would choose that, right? Yeah, that's like the straight hedonism. But one of Mill's points, or one way to interpret it. No, I kind of agree with you sometimes. Sometimes I feel that way too. But one of his points was like, humans we can be dissatisfied with our world, right? And a reason we're dissatisfied is we see ways and envision ways we can improve things. So he saw dissatisfaction as an essential part of the good life because it's a way for us to look outside of ourselves and say, hey, things could be better. Whether it could be more just, whether my room would look better if the couch was over there, whether it'd be awesome if I had more money, whatever it is, right? Things could be improved. And then I can start thinking of ways to improve them. And I get pleasure from pursuing those new routes and trying to make my world better or my life better, right? And so dissatisfaction plays an interesting role, I think, in his theory, and it makes sense, right? That's one of the ways we adapt and change our world and keep trying to like our life is constantly like trying to complete this project that we can't complete
Mm.
and constantly like going back to the drawing board and restarting or reworking it, right? And trying to make that perfect painting, but really what it is a bunch of sketches and eraser marks and stuff and restarts.
Hmm.
Yeah,
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 definitely. It's challenging because as soon as you think you have it figured out, then you realize you don't.
yeah.
Starting all over.
And ideals are funny that way too, because even if we hit an ideal, we would just look around and find something else to be satisfied with.
Hmm.
So like it's not like, you know, if the world could be ideal, that would be like perfection, And I think we see that in movies, right? You got your Wakandas and you're like, sci-fi where like they have these like advanced civilizations, or like Wall-E where everybody's like just lazy and fat on
But
their couches
okay,
that move
but we
around.
also have this, yeah, but we also have this now where people have this concept of an ideal world, the way people aren't supposed to be racist, they aren't supposed to be sexist, they're not supposed to pollute, they're supposed to be nice to everybody, they're supposed to be a good citizen, law-abiding, all of this stuff, and it's just like this ideal world, but it's just not reality.
I know. I think that's one of the problems is that that's this dissatisfaction, right? And then people, but I think there's a lot going on with that, right? And like a lot of people do it because they makes them feel good to be like, the
Of
what do you call
course.
it, talking head, or like,
Hmm.
virtue signaling and stuff. And but actually getting out there and doing things is hard. And
Hmm.
like, yeah, there's a lot of things we can call negative, but guess what? We'd have to restructure like our entire society to deal with most of them.
Hmm.
Like, come on, like systemic racism stuff. Like, you have to restructure everything. You have to change how we educate. You have to do so much. It's going to take time. So I think, yeah, I think it's unfortunate, and like, pretending that things could be ideal and then trying to force people to be ideal is not going to work because it's not ideal now. You have to work towards it. That's why I always liked philosophy, because it's like, that idea of like, yeah, you can have a good life, but it's up to you to work towards it and work on it and keep working on yourself. It's not like, you're not going to have like build healthy habits in 7 days and then they're going to stick and you're all of a sudden a good person, right? Like
Hmm.
it takes your whole life and you're going to constantly run into new situations you couldn't, you know, even guess of. Yeah.
Yeah, I like in the Tao Te Ching where it says, uh, the the good man is the bad man's teacher, and the bad man is the good man's job. Because it kind of says, like there's always going to be two sides to everything. And really, I think it was Marcus Aurelius or someone who said that like the things that you hate in someone else, that's the shadow you're casting. So it's not like,
Yeah.
like it's not like they exist outside of you. That's because of exactly who you are that causes. And I see that stuff all the time in myself, where like people who are slow, who are on the phone, piss me off like so much.
Oh,
And
we
I
know.
and yeah, and I see that like that's because of these values that I've made important. Like you should walk faster and you shouldn't be on your phone all the time and you should be paying attention. Like I made these values important for myself, and because of that, it's casting a shadow that now I hate these people.
Yeah. No, it is. Yeah, because you're interpreting the world from a totally different perspective than they are.
Hmm.
Right? And one with totally different values. And I think that's the hard reality a lot of us find ourselves in, right? It's like we think we're right. We found something that works, and we just can't figure out why no one else effing sees it.
Hmm.
Right? And it gets frustrating. Yell at people and do things. But the reality is like their perspective's totally different than yours, dude. They have totally different
Hmm.
values. They probably have no idea what the hell you're thinking about.
Probably not.
Unless they're like, have
I
you had
know
some
their
beers?
val
And
I think about that. I'm like their value is probably like an empty inbox is the best thing on the planet. So I just gotta make
yeah,
sure
you
that I
never
keep my
know, right?
inbox empty and I scroll through everything on TikTok.
And they might be grinding, bro, or doing something important.
Yeah, right?
Like, they
You
might
gotta
be on
try.
their way to they might be on the way to their passive income and their job at Uber.
I know. Hashtag passive income. Driving
Yeah, that
Uber
was
all night.
that
Hashtag passive
when
income.
I was seeing it all the time, it's cracking me up because I was like, you guys don't know what that word means, apparently. Like, no one apparently has any clue what the hell that word means.
Yeah.
That's called a second job.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness.
It's funny. But yeah, it is. It's like, it's really hard because, like, I don't know. I think that's the thing we all struggle with, though. Is like, it can seem so obvious to us because we have access to all of our values, interpretation of the world, and everything.
So
But
here's
it's
an
not.
interesting thing is like this concept of an ideal world or an ideal life. All of that keeps us in pursuit and it pulls us out of reality right now.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think it's all necessarily bad too, because I think that chasing after ideals like that can lead to some very interesting things and cool advancements. I think, like, look, if Einstein, he's a good example, right? He kept writing and working on science as a patent officer because he couldn't get into grad school. If he had been like, well, I can't get into school, oh well, I'm going to lean into this other career, we never would have had the physics we have now, or it might take a lot
Hmm.
longer, right? So I think in some sense, like chasing it can be good, but you are not in the present, right? Because you're constantly trying to make the world something that it isn't. And I think
And
that's like, yeah, oh, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I would say by definition that it could never exist because it's not reality. It's something other than what's reality right now.
Yeah. It's like our own life projects, right? We're constantly trying to make ourselves into this thing, but never quite getting there, right? It's like it is like it's
Dude,
the
oh,
conundrum of being human, right? Is like we always are trying to improve things and make things better instead of appreciating what the hell is right with us now.
dude. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
funny story. So I had an inkling the other day to watch This Old House. And so
Oh God.
and so I watched the first
Jesse and the
episode.
Rippers, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So I watched
That's a
no, not
cheesy
not
band.
Full House, not Full
Oh,
House.
full.
This
Oh,
Old
sorry, full.
House. So like
Oh,
the
this old
PBS
house.
thing where Bob
Oh,
Vila
yeah,
builds
yeah. Where
houses.
they go and fix the house.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking totally different train of thought.
Dude, okay, so get this. First ever episode, 1979. He
House is like $1.
he bought it for $17,000. Okay? Now over a million,
How is
right?
that possible?
Dude,
How is that effing possible, right? And
crazy.
that's just it though. But that's the problem. Like yeah, we're not good at the present. It's like, well, it's like kids going to college. Like, oh yeah, I'll take out $300,000 in loans, and I'll probably pay that back. Like, no,
Never.
you won't. Not with the way the economy is now, not with the way things are now. But it's like, I think that's the hard thing too. Of like, I know myself. Like, if I'm not optimistic, I am not optimistic. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I'm depressed.
So I have to
Yeah.
operate. No, I know. It's seriously, dude. Yo, I operate, and Anna always says this. She's like, it's so frustrating. She's like, because you're optimistic about everything. I was like, but if I'm not, I can't function. So like, it doesn't matter if it works out. I don't care if it works out. In the moment, I have to be optimistic that it's gonna work out. It's the
Hmm.
only way I can operate. And it's like that's like that ideal thing too, because it's like I don't know how to turn that off. And it's like I think a lot of us operate that way. Like it's not a matter of what happens. It's just to get through now. We have to think this way.
You
It's really,
have
it's
to
like
be. You
yeah,
have to be.
yeah. Being human is really difficult.
Dude, tell me
Hard
about it.
game.
Freaking tell me about it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So anyway, there you have it, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
all
So
I
can
got.
we ever achieve an ideal world? I don't think so. I don't know. I think we just said that ideals aren't achievable. But there you go.
Hmm.
Hey, if you like this episode though, check us out on YouTube wherever you get your podcast. Please like, share, subscribe. It'll help us out a lot. And if you could leave a review, especially a positive one, that would be awesome. If it's negative, just forget about it. Check us out later week for another episode. Till then, later.
Later, Danny.